It will be available on the Energy Institute YouTube page within hopefully a week or so. Uh, and so please share that with anyone you think would be of interest too. Uh, Also, please, if there are anyone who's interested in joining the committee or has any best practice examples of things going on in the Northwest that you think other committee members or wider audience would be interested in, then please do get in touch. And we try and run maybe half a dozen or so events throughout the year, so it's a great chance to showcase those. Likewise, if you've got site visits that we can now go on, or sponsorship opportunities, or anything else you think would be of interest to the group, then please do get in touch. The contact details are on the Energy Institute website. So that's it from me. Please do drop any questions into the chat. I'll pass over to Adele now and look forward to the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So hi everyone, I'm Adele Upton. As Chris said, I'm a project engineer at Progressive Energy. I've been with Progressive for 2 years now, and I'm a chemical engineer by background. And I'm also the Peak Cluster project manager, which is what I'm here to talk to you today about. So hopefully you can all see my slides, but just shout if not.
So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Great. So who is the Peak Cluster? Who are we? So the Peak Cluster is essentially a collaboration of 6 companies who have come together to deliver industrial decarbonisation at scale. So Progressive have partnered with Breedon, who own a cement plant in Hope Valley over in the Peak District, with Tarmac, who have cement and lime plants also in the Peak District. So they have a cement and lime plant at Tunstead and a lime plant over in Hindlow. We've also got Aggregate Industries as part of the consortium, and so Aggregate Industries have a cement plant down in Coldham, which is in Staffordshire. And we also have Lhoist, who is a smaller lime plant in Hindlow. So how will it work? So the Peak Cluster will capture CO2 at each of these sites using carbon capture, and then we will transport that CO2 via a buried pipeline over towards the Northwich area, where we will pick up CO2 from Lostock Energy from Waste plant. And then we will continue on over through Cheshire towards Liverpool Bay or Morecambe Bay for storage in depleted gas reservoirs. So why do we need to do this project? Cement and lime are vital raw materials to the UK. Not only do they underpin our steel manufacture, our glass manufacture, but they are also obviously used in roads, railways, houses, buildings, all sorts. And not only that, lime is also used in many other industries, and it's often an unseen ingredient. So lime can be used for water purification, for sugar manufacture, for toothpaste manufacture. So really, cement and lime are part of everyone's everyday lives. And the Peak Cluster cement and lime partners together produce around 40% of the UK's lime and cement. And between them, they also support around 1,000 jobs and obviously contribute significant amounts of GVA to the economy. And so by doing this, they also naturally emit 3 million tons of CO2 per year, which account for around a quarter of Derbyshire's and Staffordshire's emissions. In addition to this, Lostock also emit a further, or will emit, I should say, because they're not built yet, but they are under construction. But they will emit 600,000 tons of CO2 on top of that 3 million. So we're talking huge sources of CO2 that we need to decarbonize if we want to keep our cement and lime industry within the UK. And as a net importer of cement already, it's even more vital that we protect the industry that we still have. So how do you decarbonize cement and lime plants? Well, the MPA did a really interesting study into this. And as you can see here from this slide, CCS is vital for cement and lime plants. Unlike most industries who can fuel switch as fuel emissions are the primary source of their CO2 emissions, that's not the case for cement and lime industry. For the cement and lime industry, 60% of their emissions arise as a direct consequence of processing the limestone raw material. And there is no other way at the moment that you can reduce those emissions without CCS. So that's why you need CCS for cement and lime. So for our partners back in 2020, we started doing some early feasibility work into how will we decarbonize these sites, because as you know, they're located over in the Peak District, so that they're nowhere near the coast. They're nowhere near either High Net or the East Coast cluster, so that they're not near any sources or storages of CO2. So the first option is to shut down the plants, which obviously is not really an option to decarbonize, because this is not the policy of government. Deindustrialization is not government policy. And ultimately, we would lose high-skilled employment opportunities, as well as not solving the problem, because we would just end up importing even more cement and lime, which are unlikely to be green sources of green cement. And additionally, there is no reason other than decarbonisation to shut down these plants, as we have substantial UK limestone reserves in this area. So shutting down the plants was pretty much immediately ruled out. So the second option we looked at was obviously to implement carbon capture. Now, you can implement carbon capture at the coast and store that CO2 more easily in depleted gas reservoirs. However, our plants are not located near the coast, they're over in the Peak District. So we looked into whether it would be worth moving those plants over towards either High Net or East Coast. And this was pretty much discounted pretty early on, because as you can imagine, using HGVs to transport large amounts of limestone was unlikely to go down well with the locals, and it was just very challenging to work out those logistics. So that was ruled out, because the plants are where they are for a reason. They need to be close to the raw materials, the limestone. So then that left us with doing carbon capture at the sites of where they already are. So from there, we looked at how can you transport that CO2 to a store. So we first looked at road transport. Now, again, as you have with transporting the limestone material, you would have the same problem with transporting CO2, because it would result in 3 million tons would result in 1,000 vehicles or vehicle movements a day. So again, that is not socially acceptable, nor is it great emissions wise. So then we looked into rail transport. Rail transport was a little bit better, 10, 11 trains a day for this volume of CO2, but then our rail capacity is already constrained, our rail networks. And some of the sites don't even have a rail connection. So we would also need to build additional rail networks to facilitate this. So that left us with pipeline. So we looked into whether pipeline was feasible, and we did a cost comparison to road and rail transport, and pipeline came out as the least disruptive in terms of kind of movements per day, because as you can imagine, once a pipeline is in the ground, you will barely notice it is there. And also cost-wise, over the lifetime of the project, a pipeline is significantly cheaper once built. And also taking into account CapEx and OpEx. So essentially, that is what we've decided to do. We have the way the peak cluster will work is within the site's boundaries, the sites will implement carbon capture, and we will build a buried pipeline between each of the sites to aggregate outside of the Peak District, and then a main trunk line will take it past Northwich, where Lostock Energy from Waste Plant exists, over towards Cheshire West, from where the CO2 will be stored in either Liverpool Bay or Morecambe Bay. And so that is simply based on the fact that Liverpool Bay there is obviously HyNet, and then over in Morecambe Bay you have the Morecambe Net Zero project, which has significant volumes of CO2 storage available as well. So down in the left corner you can see Aggregate Industries Cold and Cement Plant, and then next to it you have Tarmac Hindlows Lime Plant, Lhoist Hindlows Lime Plant. Then also in Buxton you have Tarmac Tunstead Cement and Lime Plant, and then finally the only plant that's actually in the national park, which is Breedon's Hope Cement Plant. And now what you can see here is two routes. So what we've been doing over the past year is developing routing corridors to understand what is the best way to get this CO2 over to Cheshire West, and is it technically feasible? Can we do it whilst avoiding settlements, landfill, any kind of constraints, and is it physically possible to route a pipeline over towards that area? And essentially what we found is it's challenging, but it is. And what you can see here is two of our corridors. So we have a northern corridor, which takes you north of Northwich, and a southern corridor, which takes you south of Northwich. Both routes are about 160 kilometers in length, and they will be up to 36 inches in diameter. There will probably be 4 to 6 above ground installations that will be used to maintain the pipeline along the length of the route. And there is no intermediate compression planned at this stage. So in terms of timeline and when we will be operational, we have just completed our feasibility studies into pipeline corridors, and we are preparing to commence front-end engineering design in early 2024, where we'll also look to gain consent for this pipeline. Following this, once we have consent in 2026 or early 2027, we will then need a 3.5 year construction and commissioning work stream before the pipeline and capture plants are operational by 2030. And so, yeah, that is everything I have to share with you today on Peak Cluster. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Adele. Thank you for that. I'm just having a look at the chat. It's not showing up on here, but I might be wrong. Should we just open it up to the floor for any questions, please? If you just come off mute and perhaps say who you are and who you represent and your question, please. I'll maybe start if that's okay, as my prerogative as chair. In terms of the timescales, it seems quite ambitious. How confident are you that you'd get the necessary consents in a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, this whole project is ambitious. It's a word that we live by. Yes, we are confident that we can submit our application within a reasonable time frame to be able to gain consent. It is simply a case of whether that will go through the planning inspectorate and the timeline that they propose. The 18-month process will be followed, because as we have seen in Teesside, that there have been delays. So we are confident that we can do what needs to be done on our side and get this project consented by the time it needs to be. But not everything is within our control, I think it's fair to say.
And is it worth just mentioning a bit about that process in terms of getting consent, who you're going to consent for, and on what, and who all those various parties are? I know you mentioned planning, but there's others too.
Yeah. So because the pipeline is 160 kilometers in length, it is deemed a national significant infrastructure project. So we will need to seek a development consent order from the Secretary of State. And the capture plants will either need to go down their own DCO route, or they'll need to get consent from the Town Country Planning Act and their local planning authorities. So yeah, that's the route that we'll be taking to consent this project.
So then, if it goes down that route, it'd be mandated if it was approved by the inspectorate, and
Correct. Yeah.
a bit like a major project like Heathrow or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. There was a question that flagged up. It's not particularly clear on my phone. I just see it. I think it was someone called Mark who might have asked about the storage, the CO2 storage. I'm guessing that, Mark, I don't know if you want to come in. Is that in terms of leaks, or is it a lot longer term storage you're thinking of there? I don't know if it looks like you're not on mute, Mark, or maybe you're shy. Maybe just give your thoughts, Adele, in terms of how confident you are in the storage, and what sort of contingencies are around in transport and in long-term storage.
Yeah. So this technology is proven. I see Marcus added that CO2 storage by HyNet isn't proven yet. Yes, HyNet is not operational, but it will be operational before the peak cluster is. And essentially, we hadn't been to the moon until we've been to the moon. Technology improvements happen. And as we know that this is a similar technology to that used in enhanced oil recovery, which, let me be clear, that is not used in this project. We are storing in depleted gas reservoirs. There is no enhanced oil recovery to be had. They are fully depleted and will be used for CO2 storage only. And so that was that. Yes, we are confident in the CO2 storage technology. And whilst I'm not a CO2 storage expert, the people who will be operating the stores are experts in their stores. And the depleted gas reservoirs stored natural gas for millions of years. So why can they not store CO2?
Yeah, I suppose it's much more complex molecule than, say, hydrogen, where there's more concern about leaks.
Exactly.
Andrew, you had a question flagged up from you about the amine process. Do you want to jump in at this point and just ask that question?
Well, I mean, the capture of the flue gas will have to be concentrated from cement and lime plants. I believe the process is normally an amine process, which is also, is that right?
The most advanced technology do use amines in terms of our capture plants. They are all undertaking their own individual feasibility studies, looking into a range of technology options. They haven't selected which exact ones they'll be using yet, so I can't comment on our plants. But yes, a lot of capture plants do use amines.
I mean, in fact, the amine process is quite energy intensive. There's energy and carbon dioxide equivalent used in capturing the carbon dioxide from flue gas.
Yes, so in HyNet, they will be using low carbon hydrogen. So whilst it's an energy intensive process, it won't be adding to the emissions if they use low carbon hydrogen. Over in the peak district for peak cluster, they will be taking into account the additional fuel use and be capturing the additional emissions as part of that carbon capture process.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of fugitive emissions, I mean, what are your thoughts there? Are you able to capture all the CO2? Because a lot of these plants are fairly open in terms of that process to burn off the CO2.
Yes, so it is a complicated project in the sense of, you're right, the plants are difficult, but In terms of the overall capture rate, we will look to capture a minimum of 90% of the total site emissions, but that depends on each site and how they choose to kind of implement this process. Obviously, it's better for them to capture more because of the trading scheme, but that's more within each site's remit.
And does it depend on the type of process, whether it's a vertical or horizontal system, or
exactly, and the type of technology that they choose.
Okay. And will the power used for capture, will it be green sourced, or either on site or from a green third party source?
I don't think that's been decided yet. I think that would be very much a part of the next phase of works. So yeah, that's all I know on that area.
Okay. Are we able to ask questions about the financing of it and how that works, and whether it would be a financial benefit or is it a cost?
I mean, ultimately, if the UK emissions trading scheme continues, then emissions will become so expensive that this project is essentially a no-brainer. In terms of financing, the project so far has been funded in part by the partners and also through the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. And going forward, we are forming a special purpose vehicle to progress the pipeline and its engineering and source funding.
Okay, fantastic. Just hopefully the news today from Rishi Sunak isn't putting things back any further. I think it's there's an awful lot to do, isn't there? We've pretty much got to do everything, and the timelines in these projects are so incredibly long because of the complexity that you can't just wait to start these things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're quite lucky in the sense that all of the partners involved in this project are driven to make this happen and have already made agreements to keep progressing this project as far as possible.
Well, Chris, I've got another one.
Okay.
Well, on your Progressive Energy website, there are two other projects for cement. The first one for £3 million is state-of-the-art fuel mix for UK cement production, potential for zero carbon fuel sources such as biomass, hydrogen in cement production. And there's another one for 2.8 million, hydrogen alternatives to natural gas for calcium lime manufacturing. British Lime Association, hydrogen as an alternative to natural gas for high calcium lime manufacturing. So there's two alternative projects which Progressive Energy are pursuing.
Progressive Energy aren't pursuing any other projects themselves. They might be as under the HyNet umbrella. There may be projects so we obviously have Padeswood Cement Plant, which is a part of HyNet, who will implement carbon capture and store their CO2 in Liverpool Bay. And then there's also the Buxton Lime Net Zero project, which is looking at alternative ways to produce lime such that it produces a pure CO2 stream, so you don't need to do carbon capture, but those technologies won't be ready in time to decarbonise by 2030.
Yeah, thank you. I saw another question flag up. I don't know if it's a proper question or kind of tongue-in-cheek really, but the question was being asked about how confident you are about the regulatory landscape remaining the same until 2030. Yeah, how much of a buffer do you build in for that? And maybe it's an infinite number, but
yeah, I wouldn't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult, isn't it, when things change? Absolutely. In terms of, I was funny, there was somebody you asked them on the call late on. I'm not sure if they're on or not, but certainly it was from the health and safety executive. So I don't know what are they been a key consultee in this, and what can you say about that?
Yeah, so the HSC obviously are located in Buxton, so they're very much an interested party. In terms of consultation, I know that they came to we ran a drop-in event in Buxton for the public, and they came en masse after work. So we briefed a few of them there. And then I know that I think the project director, John Egan, is either planning a briefing for the HSE or already has done that. But yes, they are definitely key stakeholders in who we want to engage with.
And I don't want to preempt you, Dan, but I was trying to think of your name and when I was raising the question, but Dan's actually here, so I'll hand the floor over to you. You might still be on mute. Just while Dan's figuring that out, there was another comment that CCS has been talked about since the 1990s, but there's still very few operational plants. The only one in the UK is the Tata Chemicals in Northwich. Again, I don't know if you want to respond to that or just to.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the driver hasn't been there to implement CCS in terms of implementing CCS is costly, it's expensive. Yet emitting is free. So why would people implement CCS and pay for that when there needs to be some kind of market? There's been a market failure to allow this CO2 to be emitted. Hence why the government is stepping in and building these business models to make it so that it becomes a more incentive. There's a better incentive to implement carbon capture than just continue emitting. And I know Tata Chemicals, they utilize their CO2 for production in other areas. So they've proven that the technology can be done. They just use their CO2 rather than store it.
Well, excuse me, I do know about the Tata plant. It's quite different from anything else. The carbon dioxide is, as you say, reacted with something else to make, I think, a bicarbonate. So it's not really carbon capture and storage, it's carbon capture and use.
Well, yes, exactly. So I'm saying carbon capture, that technology is proven.
Yeah, it's CCUS rather than CCS. Yeah. I don't know, Dan, have you managed to get on the call? Looks like Dan's very, very still or frozen. And I know in power production, it was estimated that it probably halves the efficiency of the power plant to capture CO2. I don't know if that's comparable with it's a slightly different model, but to capture CO2 from power generation it does take a lot of energy to do that. I think that was primarily around the compression side and
I haven't seen the calculations for the cement plants, so I can't comment on that in terms of cement.
Dan has messaged to say that the HSE systems have let her down, so hopefully she comes back. But if not, it's not to worry. If there are further questions, Della, are you happy to if I collate those and send those on? Hopefully there won't be too many.
Yep. And also we have on the slide there kind of ways that you can get in contact with P Cluster directly as well.
And the last question, are the slides available? Yes, I've got a copy, so I will circulate those to everyone along with a link to the recording.
Can you hear me now at all?
Yes. This better be a good question, Diane.
Yes, basically what I was trying to say was that unfortunately I missed your briefing to HSE, which is why I'm on today. In terms of the regulations, it's still sort of a moving feast at the moment. With the hydrogen pipelines, we're looking at using GSMR as a basis with additional information typically what you'd submit for a coma type report. I would imagine because CO2 isn't yet a coma named substance, it's not covered by the regulations, but I would imagine there'll be a similar approach initially to that, and maybe further regulations a little bit later down the line.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think a lot of regulators are having to make do this research, make these changes as new things come to light, new ways of working, etc. I know the EA are having to do the same from an environmental point of view with definitions of things and how they approach things as new knowledge comes to light. So you guys have to figure out how to regulate it, and it's important that you're involved at the early stages.
Yeah, and I think there's continuous consultation with interested parties.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's a kind of a comms plan on that, Adele. There's some sort of communication plan.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do in the peak cluster is really learn as much as we can from HyNet, hence why we started this early engagement. So we've actually been talking to local councils about the peak cluster for over a year now, to really kind of make sure that we were taking into account kind of any feedback that they had into the project as early as possible. And that's why we launched the project in May publicly, because we want to engage with as many stakeholders as possible in terms of plans going forward. It's just being present in the local community, running these briefings. So for example, next week I'm going to a jobs fair in the Peak District to talk about peak cluster, HyNet, engineering jobs, construction jobs that are upcoming. I know my colleagues are briefing the Peak District National Park Authority, and we continue to engage with MPs and the councils and climate action groups such as Hope Valley Climate Action and Transition Buxton, to really get to essentially engage with the local stakeholders and spread the word about peak cluster.
And is the Environment Agency also involved?
I don't think we've engaged with them yet, but they are definitely on the list of key stakeholders.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's environmental permits for storage of CO2, for instance, and the transfer of.
Yes.
Mark mentions Transition North, which would be interested in. Do you know who they are? Sorry, I didn't say the whole message. It just sort of flashes up the first few lines.
I don't know if we've got their details. It would be great to get them on the list and get a briefing arranged. I know we've also talked to Transition Wilmslow, or we will be talking to Transition Wilmslow this week. But yeah, I would love to add them to the list of key stakeholders to brief.
Mark's just said he will arrange that. So if you want to do that through me, then I'll pass it on. Or certainly you've got Dale's details on the slides as well. Has anyone got any final questions?
Well,
that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Adele, for giving your time on a Wednesday evening. Really do appreciate that, especially as it was fairly short notice for yourself. So thank you for that. I see John has joined. No, is he? I can't see actually. Thought I did. Your colleague who was originally going to do it, John Egan, was going to join when he can. Just a final thank you from me. I will get the slides out and a copy of the recording as well. Please keep an eye out for other events that we're putting on. I know we're planning to do on a completely separate subject, but relevant, an ESOS update, which is the Energy Savings Opportunities Scheme. There's a number of changes that are planned for that phase. That phase has been delayed by 6 months till June next year to allow those changes to come into regulation. So we'll do an update shortly, and we'll get an invite out for that event. Either it might possibly be face to face, but certainly we'll get something on in the next few months. And if anyone has any ideas, please get in touch, and we look forward to hearing from them. Or if you've got hosting sites or speakers that you think would be worthwhile listening to. But thanks again, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks all.
okay, thanks, Chris.